Hello there, my name is Aaron.
And I'm Christy, and we're here today to talk to you about Novacut, which is a new cloud-enabled, collaborative, open-source editing platform that has just launched a Kickstarter campaign.
And a few days ago, we had the pleasure of having a 3-hour or maybe even longer conversation with the lead developer of the software. We took a few notes to share with other editors out there about how this software is going to work. One of the biggest things about it is that it's open source, which means that it'll never be destroyed by some corporate decision that they need to go in another direction, because the community can always create more versions or create their own spin-offs or their own amendments to the software to keep it doing what it is that the community needs it to do.
And what the Novacut team is basically dedicated to is creating more profitability for filmmakers who are basically have lower, production costs by shooting on sort of HDSLRs. So the idea is that they're going to optimize workflow, encourage sort of collaboration by lowering the cost of that, and mitigate risks associated.
Right, and to add to that, they talked about how, if they can lower the person hours,
right,
then you'll end up being more profitable as a project. If you're spending time like I am right now, turning things into ProRes and
right,
lots of workflows that just take lots of space and lots of time.
They have something called a distributed media library, which basically makes things like backups, checking for file integrity, and retrieval of media like really automated and very intuitive. So the idea is that as a creative, you're going to spend less time doing like the really boring sort of technical stuff and more time doing what you do, which is being creative.
Right. And they also are supporting right now Canon cameras. And we're shooting on GH1 and GH2. So that's not listed on their site yet, but they did talk about AVC HD, which is what those cameras shoot on, potentially being supported. And their general approach was, hey, this is just going to be expanded over time and we'll eventually support as many things as possible. And they also talked about how there would be automatic sync. So you could record on what we're recording on right now, which is like, a Tascam or an H4n, and you can then put those files on the timeline and the audio.
It will auto-sync to the camera audio that comes in.
Right, and if you have multiple cameras, it supports multi-camera editing, so you can shoot a scene with two angles. And they even talked about on their site having it automatically cut between the characters that are speaking, and creating plugins that can do interesting, neat things like that.
Right. And something else that's really cool about what the team is sort of working on is they are looking at the bigger picture from the pre to post-production sort of pipeline. So they also want to be integrating sort of script writing features in the future, storyboarding features. They want to sort of handle the creative process from the beginning to the end. So they're really looking at ways that they can grow from being sort of just a video editing platform to an entire workflow system for filmmakers.
Right, and that most applies to doing narrative work. And one of the things we talked about on the phone is the idea you could import a script, feature film script, and then create storyboards on your editing timeline, and then later replace those scene numbers with the shot scenes, because Celtics, which is open source script writing software, lets you say which day in your production schedule you're going to be shooting things. So you can start to imagine how various open source software can start to all work together and create a much more efficient environment, and also let people do things like tag footage, which is more for the documentary side of things, but also good for narrative. But, say you have, like me, 40 hard drives filled with terabytes and terabytes of footage. I have like an index of what's on all those drives, but I don't have tags and ways to organize like the entire, catalog of everything that I have. With Novacut, you'll have thumbnails, metadata, even low-res proxies locally without having to hook up hard drives unless you want to. And you'll have access to that stuff in the cloud. So other people will be able to look at your tags about your footage, or little markers about, the costume designer had a comment about this part of the shot, the director had a comment about this part of the shot, or if it's documentary stuff, like people online who are looking at the public clip, they all like this moment that was said. You could really start to expand how you think about metadata and how it's shared between people.
And that leads directly into sort of what they're trying to do with collaborative editing, which is not only sort of sharing that tagging, but sharing the ability to actually in real time edit on the same sequence with another editor who's not in that location. So they're kind of trying to be the Google Docs of editing, essentially, which is really exciting because I know that we've done a lot of editing sort of remotely before, and having something that is backed up, like in the cloud, enabling us both to work on a real-time edit it just doesn't exist right now. So that's exciting.
Yeah, I mean, to add to that, a lot of times we share Final Cut Pro documents so that then we can make the edits on another system that has the same media, but we don't have any easy way of keeping track of where we've made copies of the media.
Right.
So the media library will keep track of all the places the media exists, and the project file itself will literally be stored in the cloud. So you could be editing at the same time parts of the timeline. As long as you're in a different part, it'll sort of version track and make sure that you don't overwrite the other person's work. And we've never had that capability, so that's just going to be huge. Right. Overall, pros and cons?
Well, the pros, I think, are pretty obvious. It's open source, so any functionality that doesn't exist right now can easily be implemented in the future by the fact that any programmer can come along and add that functionality. Plus, the Novacut team is incredibly dedicated to filmmakers. I mean, they have extensive conversations with us. I know they've had conversations with a lot of other people, and they listen and they implement that into sort of their ideas of what they're building for the future. And that's really exciting because I know there is existing software out there right now that doesn't have that relationship with their creative community. So the fact that this team is dedicated to filmmakers and looking at the big picture of the future of filmmaking is really exciting and something to get behind.
And the only drawbacks that I see are that this thing doesn't exist today yet because they're still building it. Right. And also, when it does emerge, it will be beta. It will be missing a lot of things. It, for example, won't have advanced audio mixing and manipulation, won't have advanced graphics capabilities that I'm used to doing in my editing workflow. So the idea is that it'll either introduce these things later, or you'll use separate applications. Right. Blender is an application that's out there for motion graphics and 3D animation, and I've never used it, but I'm interested in going open source. If I could take all of my post-production open source, that would just make me a happy person. So overall, thumbs up to this Kickstarter campaign. I highly recommend people go over to their Kickstarter and donate even just $1. They have all kinds of perks and bonuses for people who make donations, and this is how it happens. The people rise up and they take matters into their own hands, and we do what we need, to get done to make the media that we want to make. So thanks for watching, and let's keep this conversation about Novacut going.